Good stuff. Well, welcome everybody. It's just after 4:30. We've got a lot to cover in a short space of time. Very exciting panel here to get their insights. You're here for restructure your business to reach net zero. So what that really means is about looking beyond the technology and the sort of the pure targets of net zero to examine all the internal and system changes that organizations have to do to hit true net zero. So with that, we're delighted to have on our panel Jane Ewing, SVP of Sustainability for Walmart, Hana Kajimura is Sustainability at Allbirds, and Emily Williams, VP of Sustainability and Strategy at Edison Energy. They're going to have a chance to introduce themselves, their organization, and a sort of a prompt that we gave them at the start. But first, just a quick word on me. I'm Peter Boyd. I'm a lecturer at the Yale School of the Environment. I teach a course called Perspectives on Environmental Leadership, and also a resident fellow at the Yale Center for Business and the Environment, and do sort of leadership, purpose-driven leadership coaching in Yale for all the students, and then outside Yale with my company, Time for Good. So that's our panel for today. And really, I suppose my personal perspective on this, and sort of why I'm so excited to have this group with us today, is I really care about both the ambition and the clarity of getting to net zero. So not only if we had just high ambition, if you think of it a 2x2 and no clarity, that would be greenwashing. If we had just clarity and no ambition, that just wouldn't be far enough and fast enough. We need to be very clear on what we're doing and ambitious, top right-hand corner. And I think nobody in this conference is in the bottom left, because that's just frankly in the way in terms of what we need to do. So I'm looking for ambitious and clear goals. And I think the other bit I teach at Yale and I'm really interested in is like self to system. Is this like, how can we become great sustainability leaders as individuals? How can we mobilize a team around us? And then how can we apply system thinking to sort of and spot all the interconnections in terms of what we're trying to do? One of the sort of the teaching sort of mantras I think that I carry with me from an old newspaper in the 1900s is you're afflicting the comfortable and comforting the afflicted. And people come into, I think, Yale and many other universities like us, and those that think that climate change is easy and getting to net zero is easy, it's kind of my aim to knock them off that pedestal and say, this is really complex, this is really hard, it's not as easy as you think it is. And then those that come in thinking, this is I've got this, it's just this, and this, so knock them off. The others are also true. It's just like if they come in awe of the whole program and it's just so big, it's so hairy, it's completely unsolvable. It's hopefully panels like this where you say, no, there's a bit of the system, there's an organization. You can grab hold of this and you can really change something if you devote your career and mind to it. So with that in mind, it's great to have this panel here where, as I say, we're going to take you on a journey beyond the tech and beyond emissions reductions to all the changes in the other parts of the organizations, the humans, the people, the systems, the processes. And so we're going to have 3 to 5 minutes of opening comments from our panel. I'm not going to really nudge them other than maybe do a 5 for like that's 5, but I think they'll probably want to get into the discussion ourselves. Before I do that, just so that we know who we're talking to, I want to activate one poll here. If you can go to your polls, you will hopefully see a poll that says, who's in the room today? And are you more like Jane? Are you a large established organization trying to bend the curve? Are you more like Hana? Are you a startup growth stage company trying to bake it in from the early days? Are you like Emily, a product provider and service provider to the above two? Or are you a bit like me, sort of somebody sort of sitting here on the sidelines in awe of the other three, consultant, academic, NGO with ideas and effort to help others? If you can you all do that? Thumbs up for the panel. If you can, have you been able to also do register? Can you see it? Yep, Emily can see it. That's good. Hana, you see it? Yes, you can see it. Excellent. It's just to your right-hand side next to chat. It's the next button over. Oh, Jane's got it. Excellent. So that means hopefully the rest of you, the sort of 100 or so with us, will hopefully see it. I can hopefully show the results. I don't know if I can see. I can't see it, but can you guys see it?
I think you can see it after you vote.
After I vote. There you go. Okay. Yeah. There you go. So I've shown it. So excellent. So 39%, the biggest share, actually top two, the large established organizations bending the curve and consultant academic NGOs. Thank you very much. And Emily, thank you also for polls coaching. And on with the show. Jane, I'm going to start with you. Walmart's been obviously working on sustainability for a while, inspired, I think I heard in the prep call from Katrina back in 2005. Your 15 questions back in 2009, I remember, rocked the sustainability industry and the value chain, just asking some sort of very fundamental but good questions to your value chain. But what we're intrigued about, I think, in our preparation was engaging with, I think it's 2.3 million employees. And even better, when I looked up your LinkedIn, sort of VP of Digital Acceleration, VP of International People, you have got a cross Walmart view of this. So take it away, Jane. Tell us how you do it.
Great. Thank you for the question, Peter, and thanks for the opportunity to be here today. Thanks, and hello, everybody. As you said, Peter, it's been 15 years that we've been on this journey at Walmart, and it was Hurricane Katrina that provided to be the catalyst for the change. We saw firsthand how climate change can impact communities and the devastation that was caused, and we realized then that our scale and some of our unique strengths could make a positive and meaningful difference for these communities. So on the back of that, our CEO at the time, Lee Scott, he set some pretty ambitious goals. He set a goal to become powered by 100% renewable energy, to create zero waste, and to sell more sustainable products. And on the journey, we've set more and more ambitious goals as we've gone. We haven't always known exactly how we're going to deliver them, but really, you said it, Peter, we have 2.3 million people that are committed to trying to figure out how we're going to do this. And it's really part of our purpose as a company, which is to help people save money and live better. And so we want our customers to have access to products that sustain people, but also sustain the environment. So, it starts by building our own capabilities internally, but also our supplier capabilities and ensuring real transparency. So you mentioned the 15 questions we frequently ask our suppliers questions as to how they're doing on the journey. And, back then it was called the Sustainability Index, and we've continued to evolve that, and it really analyzes and collects information across a product life cycle. So we gather that data, and then we use it to identify social and environmental areas that need work, and we ask them to partner with us and drive for this improvement. So it allows suppliers to set their own scores and how they rank, but it also allows us to see how we're doing. And as I said, we've set multiple goals over the past few years. We've made some really good progress, and we can talk more about that. But really, last year was kind of the next stage in our chapter of development. So we set a goal. Our CEO, Doug McMillan, he set a goal for us to become a regenerative company. So this whole idea that we restore, we renew, we replenish, and we conserve. So we set goals focused on combating climate change and reversing nature loss. So, it was a pretty proud moment. We targeted zero emissions across our operations by 2040, and that's without relying on carbon offsets. And we committed to help protect, manage, or restore at least 50 million acres of land and 1 million square miles of ocean. So lots of work to do, and happy to talk about it as we go forward, but I don't want to overstep my time, Peter, so I'll kick it back to you.
I've got to get better at the back on mute, quicker on the draw. You've got with 1 to 2 minutes left. Love to know, how did go for from Doug to 2.3 million? What are some of the, maybe just 2 minutes on the sort of how you've done the engagement side?
Yeah, and I don't even begin to say we've got all the answers and that every single associate knows absolutely everything we're doing. But if I take the example of last year when we were working to set the goals on zero emissions and on nature, we kind of did a bit of a roadshow around different groups, different leaders around the organization, took their Q&A, got their buy-in at a leadership level. We're a big company, so we have a lot of leaders with skin in the game. So we definitely started at that leadership level. And then we hosted events, particularly our Milestone Summit, where we announced the goals. And we made sure our associates across the stores and the clubs and the different countries had access to those materials, videos, Q&As, and we just continue to beat that drum. And, we have some of our internal communication platforms where we have what we call the Walmart sustainability advocates, and we try and engage people on multiple different levels. Even things simple, well, relatively simple, like as we start to return back to the office, having been more primarily remote over the last 18 months, how do we instill some more sustainable practices? Like we spent 18 months not printing things, so let's continue that when we get back to the office. Let's not go back to using single-use plastic. So we're trying to activate this, Peter, on multiple different levels, and we've still got a long way to go, but we're making some good progress.
Great. Thanks so much, Jane. Excellent, and that's still wrapped up into my 5. Thank you so much for that. Hana, let's move on to you. Completely different situation. So sort of managing sustainability as a core value since startup, and a punchy start to your sustainability page. I was impressed. Like your outfit is killing the planet, and it says on the top line, and then you guys are giving us some outfits / apparel. So can you sketch out how the business was created, how it kind of almost like grew up with sustainability as a core value? And really intrigued because just like Jane has got this ideal background for this panel with international people sort of heading that up, you've did Bain Consultant and the ex Moonshot Factory and EDF. So I'm looking for a whole world view from you as well, Hana. So go for it. No pressure.
Yeah, it's a great segue, Peter, and it's cool to have both perspectives here of small company, big company. And we were just started 5 years ago. So back in 2016, and started with a mission around sustainability. Like the sort of market observation was that about 60% of our clothing and footwear is made from synthetics. Synthetics, of course, come from oil, which are driving the climate crisis. And our ambition was really to elevate and innovate around natural materials in apparel and footwear and effectively drive fossil fuels out of our industry. So we started with that vision among our co-founders, started the business really early as a public benefit corporation instead of a traditional C Corp, became certified as a B Corp. And then along the way, I'd say we've been really clear about our mission, which is to reverse climate change through better business. And that mission, as well as the B Corp structure, have really helped to attract employees, growing from a few at the start to 50 or so when I joined the company 4 years ago to almost 500, including our retail fleet today. And it's helped to attract those employees who really want to have an impact and wanted to work for a company that stood for something. And that already sets us off on such a good foot, because we don't just have product developers working for us. We have product developers who care about sustainability and are always asking, what can I do differently? What can I do better? We have just announced, as of a couple weeks ago, a set of commitments across our business, which we're calling the Allbirds Flight Plan. And in that, we have a target to cut our per product carbon footprint in half by 2025 and to reduce it by 95% in 2030. And what that means in 2030 is that the number that's printed on all of our products, because we label all of our products with their carbon footprint, will go down from, the footwear industry average, we think, is around 14 kilograms of CO2 today. In 2030, our products will have a label of less than 1 kilogram of CO2. And that's all before the use of offsets. We've been a carbon neutral company since 2019, so we'll keep doing that along the way. But then the last thing I'd say to your point about like mobilizing the organization is that we're constantly trying to build this into our governance practices. So we have an internal carbon tax, for example, that we pay for every pair of shoes that we produce. We have executive compensation that's tied to meeting reductions in our carbon footprint year over year, as well as like an external ESG advisory committee that advises me and other members of the organization on best practices. And so I think it's all of that really wrapped up together that gives us a shot at hitting these really ambitious goals. But also this is a totally new way of doing business and there's no blueprint. So we're kind of experimenting, seeing what actually helps to drive decision making and better behavior, and adding and refining as we go.
Great, thanks so much, Hannah. And I'm slightly quicker on the draw this time on the unmute. Again, just with a couple minutes that I've got in the, thank you so much for the three there. If anyone, consultants amongst you especially, like waterfall charts, excellent job at the bottom of their sustainability page in terms of how do they go from the 14 to the 7 to the less than 1. Wondering on that, I mean, that's almost like a carbon intensity target versus an absolute. When do you start as a growing company? When does that such a big drop in per unit actually affect it such that your total is going to go down?
Yeah, so we definitely faced that conundrum that big, small and growing companies face versus, as well as like the developing country argument, which is, like, we're still in the high growth hockey stick phase of our business. Should we be allowed to let our overall or absolute emissions increase over that same time period? And ultimately where we came out on that was no. We were born to be a different kind of business with different kinds of expectations about our growth. And so we're really committed to decoupling business growth with emissions growth from emissions growth. And so that 95% reduction in the per unit carbon footprint that I mentioned translates to about a 42% reduction in our absolute footprint against a 2020 baseline. So despite business growth, we're going to drop below our 2020 baseline, and that is aligned with the 1.5 degree pathway across Scope 2 and 3.
That's in between 2025 and 2030 is where, despite the hockey stick growth. We should have ITMOs for sneakers. Like you should, like, if you're stealing market share from a dirty company, that in the world's carbon of sneakers would be going down if you steal market share.
Exactly.
Great stuff. Hannah, thanks for getting us started. Again, a few things there of excitement to pick up in the conversation. But before that, Emily, for opening comments, it'd be great to hear yours. Sort of looking at your bio, over 1,800 megawatts of wind to your name. So that's awesome. You've helped sort of power some clients by doing that, and others, and presumably you're sort of helping them set and aim for these net zero targets. So sort of what do you see in terms of the whole business restructuring piece? Like, what does this change elsewhere in the business when you're brought in for a sort of maybe a simple brief, but you sort of see the complexity? What have you seen from where you're sitting?
Yeah, absolutely. So, to give a little quick background on Edison Energy for people that might not be familiar with us, we are an independent advisor that works with large corporations, universities, municipalities on, understanding their carbon challenges, costs, and the different choices that they're facing, and really helping them to transform the way that they're using energy, but also really how they're incorporating sustainability as well. So if you talk about that kind of transformation, I think initially a lot of our work was really around greenhouse gas reduction targets and kind of working on different implementation levers, energy efficiency, virtual power purchase agreements, and so forth for companies like Honda, Home Depot, Hershey's. So lots of major organizations. And I think what we're seeing now is really this shift from as we focus on net zero. It's about setting these goals, but also really thinking about complete business transformation. So really thinking about what are your near-term quick wins that you can get. Whether that's reducing your energy, changing how you're purchasing energy, but more importantly, what are you doing comprehensively to transform how you're thinking about a net zero strategy at really all levels of the organization. So I love Jane talking about how do you empower associates to think about this, but for us it's really how do you go from the C-suite down to engineers at a plant level, or cashiers working at our retail clients, really thinking about everything they're doing impacting the corporate journey to net zero.
Sorry, go for it.
Oh no, and But I can go lots of different ways on this. So happy to be conversational.
Well, again, with our minutes to spare, you go anywhere you like for another couple of minutes. But the ones I wanted to pick up here was often I think when a skilled consultant meets the client on these things, the portfolio sort of risk, where, as you say, the near-term quick wins might make the later big stuff harder. How do you manage that with your clients, where it's just like, sort of the LED bulb transitions, the quick payback, and then you don't have the money for the big stuff?
Yeah, I think that balance between the quick wins and saying, yeah, my LED retrofit was a no-brainer. I saved all of this money. Now what's my next thing that gets me this level of savings? I think that equivalent isn't always there. So it's really working with our clients to make them think about, how is this a portfolio approach, and how do you incorporate the actual risks of inaction beyond just the cost metrics. And so this is really where consulting becomes a change management exercise in how do you incorporate these alternative metrics? How do you think about regulatory risk or physical climate risk or changing consumer or customer preferences, and how those can potentially be incorporated into your cost calculations. So, certainly we do things like help set internal costs of carbon or carbon funds, and those are great tools. But I think that some of the longer term risk integration is something that a lot of organizations are struggling with and really kind of just getting started with on our transition to net zero.
Great. Thank you. Great 5-minute starts. And before we get in, I've got 3 questions that I want to kind of ask everybody. But before that, I just wanted to tie up one quick piece here on the internal carbon price, named sort of twice there, consulting coming in, Emily, Hana baking in from the start, and then also trying to create a transformative price to act. Jane, how does internal carbon pricing work with you? And do you do it? And if so, how?
Not yet. It is highly complex, given the highly complex supply chain that we have. So working through it, Peter, is the honest answer right now.
Yeah, great. I thought that was a classic one where you can bake it in from Hana's Allbirds size and incredibly complex on the Walmart side. So I just wanted to check.
I wish it was easy.
Great stuff. So pivoting to the sort of next section here, the sort of second half, I'm going to now make my next poll, which actually sets up our questions for everybody as well here. So go to your polls again if you can. Who is finding progress to net zero? Either whatever angle you said to question 1, as a helper, as an operator, who's finding this stuff easier, like more surprising, bigger wins than you first thought, about the same, as hard and rewarding as we thought it would be, or harder, more complex, more unintended consequences? The wins are hard to come by. Go for it. Please do sort of have a think. Okay, has everyone voted? I'll give them a couple more seconds. Had a few more sort of joiners in this session. Welcome, everybody. Okay, show results. Nobody found it easier. Zero found it easier. Good stuff. So this is the War Stories panel. Welcome to the War Stories panel. So 36% said about the same. 63% said harder, more complex, more unintended consequences. So with that, a perfect segue to, that's my question. I think I'm going to start with my panel here. So like, what has proved harder to change than you first thought? Like, which function, process, part of the organization, what made it harder than forecast? And then what did you do about it? Like, how did you change it? Maybe we started big to growth. Hana, can I start with you this time? Sort of, baking something from the beginning. What was harder than you thought?
Yeah, I think I answered this question as it was just about the same as I expected. Okay. In terms of difficulty. Again, Allbirds is privileged because we are able to start thinking about this from the beginning. When I started doing carbon footprints of our products, for example, we had 2 products now we have, a dozen. So nothing too crazy. We can actually have our arms around and calculate the carbon footprint of each of our products, so much so that we can label those carbon footprints on all of our products and really track progress over time. I think what has been the hardest for us as being a younger company is seeing the future. So as we try to make commitments for 2030, and we've only been around for 5 years, is it even, we spent a lot of time thinking, is that even a worthwhile exercise? Because we couldn't, 5 years ago, we could have never predicted where we would be today. How could we possibly fast forward 10 years and forecast our emissions with any degree of certainty? But where we landed on that, of course, is that you need to do your best and set an ambition and set the goalpost to shoot for and make sure everyone's very clearly aligned on that. And then we focus specifically on in product opportunities for emissions reduction. So very specifically increasing recycled content in this one component of the shoe, or changing that specific manufacturing process at this specific factory. And because we've invested so much in understanding our product carbon footprint and building tools internally to do so, we can actually then scale those product level changes to our overall impact as a company. So forecasting the future is one. I'd say the other that comes to mind is just competing priorities of running and growing a business and how quickly we try to do all of that. I think when we talk about the wins, I'll come back to this idea that, sustainability is not always more expensive. Sometimes it saves money, but I think it always takes longer. And when you're a young company that's agile and really moving quickly, that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, great. Thank you. That's good stuff. And Jane, some good words to build on as a parallel, small to big here. Seeing the future, competing priorities. You must know a bit about that. What's been hardest for you guys?
I could give you a really long list, so I'll agree with all of Hannah's and then add maybe I'll pick 4 more. So I think the first one I mentioned, just the sheer complexity of global supply chains. And the systemic nature of the issues. So you've got climate change, and we've got all the issues around nature. So it really does require collaboration with multiple groups of stakeholders. There's no way any one company can do this on their own. So we've got our suppliers, who I mentioned, NGO partners, our consumers, governments, everybody. So we need all to be working in the same direction. So how we figure out that broad coordination is really critical to drive change. And I think you know that Walmart's big, but if you think about our complex and large transportation system, our refrigeration fleet, we have over 10,000 facilities. There's a lot of touch points we've got to address. So I think that would be the first one. The second one I would say is the pace of innovation. Is innovation going to accelerate quickly enough? So we have innovation in the products that we sell. We have innovation in the packaging and how we reduce packaging, reduce plastic. But then if I think of, and that's going pretty well, but needs to accelerate. If I think of something like transportation, so getting to zero emissions in our fleet will require massive transformation and acceleration in both the availability and the scalability of clean fuels and battery technology. We hear a lot about electric vehicles, but they're primarily small trucks, personal use vehicles. We don't have the big, I call them lorries. I think we call them trucks in the US that go, from one side of the country to the other, and the electric infrastructure that would go with them. So we really need to drive that pace of change. And, Emily, in your area, and how do we accelerate on renewables and things like that? There's a lot of great work happening and a lot of momentum, but we've got to go faster. And then I think the last two, I would say, transparent, accurate reporting. Like, how do we make sure we report consistently? It's one thing to set the goal, but another to measure it and make sure we're all being held to the same standards. And then lastly, just engagement more broadly. Not everybody's involved in this. And I think you've probably heard of the Race to Zero campaign. At the moment, still relatively small number of retailers are engaged in that campaign from a retail perspective. And it really does need everybody to be heading in that direction if we're going to make the difference we need. So I could go on, Peter, but hopefully that gives you a sense.
It also gives me a flavor why it was a 60-40 split as well on how hard this is. And maybe a good one to wrap this question up, Emily, is like you've seen a spectrum of clients in general. Like, what's been the toughest part of the restructure pivot for your clients?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest challenges has really been when our clients have gone from the ambition of just looking at their direct emissions and their footprint and really starting to incorporate their value chain. Because as Jane mentioned, global companies with complex global supply chains. Even if you understand what your levers are in the US or in the EU, there's not always the same toolbox available in China. As you're looking upstream and downstream at your emissions, there's a whole additional level of complexity. And if you have the buying power of Walmart with initiatives like their gigaton initiative, you've got some pretty big ability to influence your suppliers. But some of our clients that are looking at their supply chain just don't have the same ability to influence, which also can certainly be a challenge. And then, you also get into the difficult to decarbonize sectors. And I don't want to dwell too much on that, because I think that we lose some of the focus on what we actually can do today if we focus too much on what we can't do. But that certainly is a challenge for some of our industrial clients.
And maybe that's a good one. And anyone who knows me as well, so I'm all on the glass half full. So I'm going to pivot right on you, Emily, and let's go to the surprising wins, like the things where you just think, wow, like that it changed and they did more than they could, or they accomplished more than they could in the progress. Any pleasant surprises that you can share? Yeah.
So I'm trying to think how interesting some of these are. I mean, some of the wins that I'm most excited about are when we work with a client and they come back and they say, you know what, we had an engineer who brought us this capital planning. They were thinking about a CHP plant that they would build in 2028, and we've got a 2030 net zero goal, and we don't want to use offsets. And so they kind of raised their hand and said, should we be doing this? And that's the kind of like interesting bottoms up approach that gets me excited in a really nerdy way. But also kind of thinking about, this portfolio view of changing the mindset at the top of an organization or within the procurement organization on not just chasing lowest cost, but how are you incorporating sustainability decisions into your procurement decisions as really the way to have that multiplier effect that we need. So those are the kinds of small wins, not the sexiest wins, but the ones we need. So
that's good. It definitely ones we need. I'd like to also just rename my ambition clarity axis from the start to like everyone needs a bit of vision and nerdiness. I think to get to net zero, we need the nerdiness and the vision. Otherwise, we're not going to get there either. So Allbirds, I'll go to you then, because that was another one you said. Baking in from the start, lots of surprising wins. Hopefully, like you said, I think you even said some of this stuff even saves money. Any other sort of what's the most surprising stuff on the win side as you get to net zero?
Yeah, on the win side, so to get to that, like cutting our per product footprint in half by 25, we've outlined 10 specific targets, like procuring renewable energy for our operations, shipping via ocean, investing in regenerative agriculture. And to get this plan approved, we spent a lot of time looking at the investment required across those 10 commitments. And what was really encouraging to see is that while some of those commitments, for example, investing in raw material R&D, does require significant investment, others like shipping via ocean or just getting more efficient at using our materials saves the business so much money that when taken together, we can deliver this plan and this 50% reduction in our footprint at a cost savings to the business in a way that actually helps to improve margin. And so that was really encouraging for me to see, because I think it's a both and. Sustainability is expensive and it saves money. But that has been really helpful to getting buy-in. And then the other, I'd say, in your point before we started, is around material R&D and this idea that investing in material R&D can ultimately scale to the industry and help to save all of us money and drive down the cost of more sustainable alternatives at scale. So for example, we were really unsatisfied with any sustainable alternatives to the foam used in our shoe sole. And so we worked with a partner to create a version of that that's derived from sugarcane instead of petroleum. We launched that material in our product, then open sourced it to the industry. And not only was that like the single biggest reduction in our carbon footprint so far, because it was one material that scaled across all of our products, but it also has led to companies from UGG to Reebok to Timberland using that material now in their shoes at a larger scale and driving down the collective cost for the industry. And so that's a business model that we're trying to repeat again and again.
Great. And that's such a great example of a surprising win and a platform, and a selfish win as well. That's fantastic. Just to like, take my understanding, the all 10, they tied up in a bow and make money. Is that right? The all 10 together. Awesome. And I think I just wanted to double click on that for everybody that's here. And then the other bit is this, like, also the cost of not doing anything. Like you sort of, so you've got the other piece, which again is more of a legacy company point of like, you've got a lot to lose if you don't act. Great example, thank you. And let's see, what Walmart's like as you said, you could give me a list of 12 things on the this is really hard. What's been surprising?
Yeah, a few things, Peter, but I just say I love Hannah's example that she just shared about the phone, because it really is a great example of collaboration. And if we all do things in a vacuum and save the wins just for ourselves, we won't get there. So fantastic to share that. I mean, I think the biggest win was actually setting the bold goals right at the beginning back in 2005. It really helped to galvanize the organization. And then last year when we set our even more ambitious goals, it was such an exciting moment for the company, and you could see how proud people were to work for it. And it links to that question we had, Peter, about how do we engage employees. So I think that was a really positive step. I think, some of the progress we've made towards the goals, you never quite know how fast it's going to go. But, since our baseline, we've reduced our emissions in our own operations by 12%. We've got to 36% renewable energy. So, yes, there's a long way to go, but those are significant steps towards that progress. And we've doubled the efficiency of our truck fleet from 2005 to 2015, and that was huge as well. Couple of other areas have been good positive surprises. We haven't talked about waste really, and the pervasive issue of plastic waste, and that could be a whole other panel, but we've made some great progress. We've got products that we're using recycled plastic. We're reducing the amount of plastic. I mean, these glasses I'm wearing are our private brand Equate, and they are made from reused plastic from the ocean. So trying to do a lot of that. But we've also invested in, and we're a founding supporter of something called Plastic IQ, which is it's a free tool, and it allows companies to figure out where they stand and then implement plastic reduction strategies. So if you haven't tried it already, it's available for everybody, but go on and have a play around with that, because it can really help you make some significant changes. And we've made some progress on, taking out plastic bags in our stores in Mexico. We're testing it out in Vermont. So, lots of real positives like that. We're reducing the amount of waste that's going into landfills significantly. So there's some really good wins along the way. And I just finished with mentioning Project Gigaton. Hannah, Emily, thank you for mentioning that. But we launched that back in 2017. And the idea is that through our supply chain, we would avoid at least a gigaton's worth of greenhouse gas emissions. And I think the positive surprise there, that over 3,100 suppliers have signed up, and they've set goals and they've made reductions, and really proud to share that we've now cumulatively saved more than 400 million metric tons of CO2. That's just since 2017. And we really work with our suppliers to help them set goals. We give tools and calculators. So it's just a really great collaborative effort, and it is making a difference. I think that's been one of the biggest, most positive surprises.
Great. Thanks so much, everybody. And it sounds like some good stuff here. If Hana hasn't been on Plastic IQ yet, and Jane, you haven't got the best foam in the marketplace on your shelves, sounds like there's some good deals to happen here after this. Looking at the Q&A piece for the last 5 minutes we've got here. So quick fire questions if you can. We've already covered Project Gigaton. Thank you, Jane. That's one of our questions nailed. One of the ones maybe on you, Jane, on the sort of medium to large businesses making a shift. Employees worried about their job. Will their job vanish? Can they make the transition? Are they on the wrong side of the transition? Did you encounter that? And maybe Emily, you might have encountered in a client. Jane, quick answer for that, even though it's a big topic.
We haven't, but I think helping associates to see the benefit of doing this work and helping engage them by giving them tools and is a great way of doing it. And I think, my job is to make this part of everybody's job. And I think each role, whatever you play, you can make a difference, and helping employees to see that, I think, can really pay dividends.
Great. And Emily, maybe take that one if there's any relevant clients, but also there's another one here on your role in driving progress in heavily regulated that you might want to have a quick answer on.
Yeah, so I think that in terms of the jobs displacement, I think that is something front of mind for some of our tech clients. And so what you see there in a lot of cases, in part because of that, but more broadly, is focusing some of their efforts around net zero, also around climate justice, environmental justice, the just transition, and trying to think about ways to couple their investments with workforce development, skills training, et cetera. So really trying to make that positive impact. And then the other question was around, sorry.
It was the heavily regulated industries.
Heavily regulated industry, yeah. So depends on what the industry is. But I think that if all you need to do is look at what's going on with Fit for 55 in Europe, and heavily regulated industry is getting regulated on climate, and so there's going to be a lot of opportunity out of that. Great.
I'm just noticing the clock. We're on 5:13, and I know that the Green Biz team run a tight ship. So any quick sort of words of wisdom of like what do you want people that are here, still the same people that joined? It's fantastic. Everyone's hung on. It's like quick word of advice, like 10 seconds, 20 seconds each. What would you sort of advise the crew, knowing that they're a mixture of every one of us on the panel here? Hana, can I start with you? One thing for them to do.
Yeah, I think we started on this, but figuring out ways to build accountability into your business. So whether that's tying compensation to achieving ESG metrics, or establishing working groups and other incentive mechanisms internally to do this stuff, or an internal carbon tax. I think it's one thing to set the goal, but the incentive structure for how you get a whole organization to move in that direction is equally important.
That's an awesome one. Otherwise, it's not just the sustainability team working on their own. And Jane, you said that you had leaders with plenty of skin in the game as well. I think you even used that word earlier. Jane, what's your top tip?
I would say, very simplistically, get started. Like if you wait to have all the answers and you wait for it to be perfect, it's too slow. So dive in and learn as you go and iterate as you go, because as long as you're heading in the right direction, you can really make a difference. And there's some low-hanging fruit out there as well as the hard stuff. Great.
Emily?
I'm speaking to a room of sustainability practitioners, so everyone knows this, but yeah, set the target. We need to bend the curve. So set it, and then iterate, be transparent, but get going.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And just to wrap up myself, I think we're all just coming up for 5:15 now. Back to that ambition and clarity, what I opened with, like a bold and clear definition of net zero. There's a Green Bids op-ed that I co-wrote on that in terms of there's 4 things to go for. I would love people to take on some of that. Microsoft, you heard earlier, cumulative responsibility for net zero. That's an interesting one. Once you get to net zero, it's just a waypoint on the way to a restorative world that we need. And hopefully we afflicted the comfortable and we comforted the afflicted today. If you thought it couldn't be done, there are people with really difficult jobs doing it. And if you thought it was easy, hopefully you've heard from them how tricky this is. I wanted to close with a John Muir quote. And actually, just one question I know I missed was carbon offsets. I know it's covered in other topics. There's a good piece in Hana's sustainability page, and I think on Walmart's page about how they buy offsets. And then if you look me up on red.plus, there's some pieces that I'm working on with the Coalition for Rainforest Nations on offsets. So lots to dive in on offsets, but I didn't cover it here because there's other panels to cover it. So I will close with the John Muir quote, which is like, when we try to pick out anything in nature by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. So as far and so my translation for that today is, when we try to get to net zero, we find it's connected to every other thing your business does and your whole industry does. So that's what we have to embrace on this. It's a complex system. And thank you so much for joining us. And welcome to the rest of the day. And thank you very much to my panel. You're doing great. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you so much.